Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. This is the Front Row Network, the podcast for people who actually like movies for NPR Illinois Community Voices. I am your host, Craig, and I had a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak to a great individual about his book that was just recently released. I spoke to Michael Grecco, who you may remember was part of the podcast back in June. We had a conversation with Michael all about his career and how he got his start into photography and how that evolved in him wanting to study different subcultures and to photograph those subcultures. And now he's taking kind of a look back at his early part of his career when he was going to clubs in Boston and New York throughout the 70s and 80s and really experiencing the punk scene. And so he has a new book out called Punk, Post-Punk, New Wave. And Jeremy and I actually had a chance to sit down and speak to him about all things about this book. I need to tell you that the images in this book, first of all, they're pulled from Michael's archives. These are really never before seen images, and they are just absolutely beautiful. If you are interested at all in bands like the B-52s, Dead Kennedys, so many of these bands, this is a book that you would cherish because it's so cool to see Billy Idol and to see these photos of them kind of in their prime in this setting that you know that these bands really truly loved and appreciated being a part of. And it really is just a wonderful look at that culture. So I can't tell you enough to go out and purchase this book. It is brand new. It's a great book that you can look through yourself, send it around as a gift, and you can find that wherever books are sold. You can find it on Barnes & Noble or on Amazon. You can just search for Punk, Post-Punk, New Wave by Michael Grecco, and you will not regret it. It's such a wonderful, wonderful book. We are going to dive right into the interview that Jeremy and I did with Michael, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to the Front Row Network. Michael Grecco, how are you, Michael?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing really, really, really well. So my first question is that we got a chance to talk to you in June, and we learned a lot about your career and how you became a photographer. And listening back to that today, actually, to remind myself sort of your story. And we're going to talk so much about your wonderful new book, which was actually released today, which means that you now can go get it. At the time that this airs and you are listening, you can find this book wherever books are sold, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere that you'd like to go to find this book. It's called Punk, Post-Punk, and New Wave, and it's by Michael Grecco. And I just want to know kind of what you've been up to since June, because we did have a chance to talk to you earlier this summer.
Well, putting together a book is like having a baby, and they don't stop. You know, my kids are grown, but they don't stop needing attention. So, we were in production, we were, doing publicity and trying to line up galleries, and it's sort of been nonstop since we started the actual book process a year ago. But it's been a 5-year project of scanning negatives and pulling stuff out of the file and finding new images and then finding more new images and then finding more new images and just trying to keep the whole project going.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And it's beautiful. Actually, I have my copy right here, so I can hold it up to people. And certainly I would encourage everybody to go out there and the images in this book, we're going to talk a lot about it, but just a wonderful book. It's got to feel really great to have it on sale finally, right?
Oh yeah. It's been it's just been nonstop. So today I think I have 5 interviews, and it's just a sort of a nonstop day. It happens that we have a lot going on release date, which is great. I've had it for a couple of weeks. It was beautiful to get in my hands, and the reaction to it has been really, really nice. So that's also really pleasing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Michael, it is so gorgeous. I don't have my copy here with me, but like Craig does. But I did want to mention, though, that our co-host who was going to be on here, Erin McCabe, she wanted us to tell you this exact quote, which was literally 3 purple hearts. She 3 purple hearts the book, and tell you that you once again captured the humanity and the essence of the punk movement. So that was what Erin wanted to let you know that she could, even though she couldn't be on today.
Well, I'll put the message out there through the radio and web airwaves, so to speak, to Erin. Great thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I echo her sentiments so much here, because it is just so incredible to see so many of these like new images of these bands and groups that we kind of feel like we know so much about. So, you've had such a long career and you've had these photos for so long. Why release the book now? Why is now the right time to put this book out there?
A number of reasons. You start hearing the music surface again, and culturally, the cultural zeitgeist for punk has started to stir again. But I had my archivist, Michael Parker, a woman who's worked for me for almost 20 years, over the past like 5 years, would pull images out and go, dude, you got to do something with these. Dude, you got to do something with these. So it's been sort of that journey of like looking at the work and going, okay, there's something here. Taking them to my friend, the gallerist, David Fahey, who, with great knowledge and understanding, it's like, these things, years ago, he told me, projects like this, not speaking to this specifically, but, my celebrity portraits and things like that. He's like, they age well, like a fine wine. So I had the same sort of, perspective on this. And, it's been a 4 or 5 year journey. We started scanning images. We made a mock-up book. We took them to a couple of publishers. I had someone who was interested. They fell out. And then I think last summer, in a moment of desperation, I took it to the publisher, Michael Sand at Abrams Books, and they loved it. My editor, Garrett McGrath, loved it. And, then you kick into doing all the things you do with the book, agreements and edits and hiring a writer. And, it just sets this whole thing in motion. And literally right up till the day of press, we were rescanning some images that we needed better scans of, and re-editing and adding photos, and adding images and swapping out images to the book right up until the moment of us having to ship it.
Wow,
unbelievable!
That's just an incredible process to be able to bring it to our homes and everything. It's interesting because the first interview you did with us, which, by the way, if you're listening to this on nprillinois.org, it will be linked right below this interview. So you can go back and listen to that first interview and kind of get the backstory and the origin story of Michael as you're listening here as well. But you mentioned in that interview how much you appreciate and enjoy studying particular subcultures. And so this is kind of a look at all things punk, but punk means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And you mentioned as a teenager, you felt like you sort of lived in that world. What does the word punk, or what is post-punk? What do these words mean to you? What is it that is about this subculture?
I'm glad you remembered that. I think that I was conscious of that, but my friend David Fahey had mentioned that I really like photographing subcultures. I years ago did a little picture story on a group of Unarians who thought they were all from outer space, and you've heard of them, Jared.
Uh-huh.
So I photographed them, and I think he saw those images years ago. And I have a series of people who perform on Venice Beach, and I did that book, Naked Ambition, an R-rated look at an X-rated industry.
That's right.
Of all the people at the Adult Video Awards and Expo, and I do like photographing subcultures, and I realized that this is a subculture that I was a part of, that I was into the music. I grew up in suburban New York. I was a jazz listener, had a couple of really great, bands I loved, Velvet Underground, Bowie, Iggy, but really thought rock and roll, commercially produced rock and roll music at the time sucked behind. Like it really was bad. I'm trying to be radio friendly.
Yeah.
I really thought it was bad. I've named them, and I hope I don't offend anyone here. The Rushes and the Kansases and the all of those bands, Boston, that were really record company produce commercializations of rock music. That's the best way to put it. And punk, when I walked into my first punk club, punk had this authenticity and a voice that music really didn't have. In the 60s it did, but it was all about protest and the Vietnam War but then 10 years later, there needed to be another voice. There was high inflation and high unemployment worldwide, and the economy sucked, and the airwaves were stifled with mediocre, unauthentic music, and punk was a voice that needed to break out. So to me, it's rebellion. To me, it's individuality. To me, it's creativity. And I think, that's one of the things that inspired me to be creative through my career.
That's so great. And, in particular, when you're looking at, this is at a time in your life when you're photographing in these clubs, you're also working in Boston kind of as a photojournalist at the time. So this is almost like your escape, right? This is kind of what you did to sort of just enjoy and bring that art along with that enjoyment while you're going to these clubs. Is that an accurate depiction of that?
Yeah, I was a stringer for the Associated Press during the day. So I was being trained by, some really top-notch award-winning photojournalists and news photographers. And at night I was just into this music and this scene. So it wasn't really a release. It was debauchery. It was, it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was, if you were lonely, you'd go hang out at the club and drink and try to pick up someone before you went home, and hopefully sleep it off and wake up if you had an assignment the next day from the AP. And we were into it. We were into the music. It was amazing to photograph these bands. It was amazing to have an assignment from Boston Rock or WBCN and be able to parlay that into being backstage with bands you really liked and admired. It wasn't, I took it very seriously in a way. That the AP taught me a certain level of competitiveness, and I wanted to make, I wanted to come back and make the best. It's the same attitude I have now as a magazine photographer, and I had through my career. I wanted to come back and make the most engaging photographs, the most unusual photographs I could of things I really liked and people I really liked,
Oh, absolutely. And you very much succeed in that. These photographs are just so rich and so like you can tell from these photographs that you're not just looking at a moment in time, you're looking at a story that's like unfolding right there, in the midst of this. And there's you already mentioned it, but there's so many great photos in here. But maybe just talk a little bit about a few of these. Like there's so many stories behind all of these. Maybe just talk about some of your favorite shots from the book here that people can see and kind of the story behind those.
Well, I mean, what's interesting about the book is obviously I was a trained news photographer, photojournalist, but you really see I had an infinity even then to portraiture.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is I look at this portraiture is it's sort of impromptu. It's run and gun, as you would say.
Yep.
It's You know, it's moments backstage, a lot of it. It's the B-52s coming off of the stage with me taping a piece of white seamless right at the exit for the show and nabbing them, you know, with one light set up and hoping someone didn't kick it over, and nabbing them and trying to shoot with this small piece of white seamless taped to the wall, trying to shoot what would look like a studio portrait of them, right? So that people would have the respect and take it seriously. But it wasn't. It was an impromptu portrait, or sticking Billy Idol in the corner of the backstage at the Paradise, in a corner that resembled how Irving Penn built a wall in his studio where he photographed people. And as a reference to that, sticking Billy in that corner and bouncing a strobe off the flash, you know, an old Vivitar 283 off the wall, and shooting 3 or 4 frames and trying to get something more than a concert picture or backstage pictures, you know. Those are the things that I appreciate in the book, and, you know, were the foretelling of me having such a deep interest in portraiture in the rest of my career. I started in high school as a portraitist, and went back to this, and this work is sort of, you know, a transitional look at portrait work through my photojournalism days.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, you know, as great as the portraiture is in this, there's some of those visceral shots you get of the shows during the shows really captures just the energy that you feel in a punk show. I remember the very first time I went to a punk concert, nothing like any of these, you know, it's like, you know, early 2000s punk rock music, but still, even then I could just like feel this energy in the room. It wasn't really like violent or dangerous or anything. It's just a lot of people feeling the music, and the band on stage just feeling that music so deeply. You know, are there any of those shots that when you're capturing them in the moment that stand out to you in the book?
Yeah, I mean, there were those shows that really stood out to me, and also because I was so into the music. I mean, I you know, sort of my lifestyle has come out with this book, because I've written about I've written about you know, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and the debauchery that went on. But, you know, I was really into the Dead Kennedys, and would sing the lyrics. It's a holiday in Cambodia where people dress in black, you know, and it's like, you've got Jello Biafra like out of his mind, jumping all over stage. That was, you know, that was an incredible show. And I think the pictures from that show are really good ones. They're really powerful ones. And you know, I told my son this, I shared this with my son, the band The Cramps, and we used to listen to the music. I had my friend Tristram would have parties at his house. Someone, a musician friend of ours, Johnny Angel, would go get a tank of nitrous oxide, and we'd all do nitrous oxide, listening to the wah 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 guitar of Poison Ivy and The Cramps. And that's another ridiculous show, because Lux is performing on stage. You know, he's all over the stage. He's acting like a spastic on stage, and his pants fall off, and he performs the rest of the show without his pants. I mean, there's a funny page in the book, funny picture, where I do Poison Ivy's portrait, and she's got her fingers up around her eyes. I love that portrait. And I pull Lux over, and he had lost his clothes. He has a towel around him, and he went to the catering table, and he took a hot dog out of a bun, and he put his penis in the bun and had me take his portrait that way. So, you know, his show was debauched, and, you know, his attitude was debauched, and he had no problem with nudity, obviously. And it was just sort of the times, you know, but those are two choice shows that I really thought were amazing.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting and something I didn't think to ask until you started talking about it, but this really is you towards the beginning of your career. And you've already mentioned some of the connective thread of how you saw the photographer you would become. But basically, if I listed a celebrity's name, you've probably photographed them at this point. So how did you use these images or this essentially like this practice at your art to mold who you were? You talked a bit about the portraiture, but also kind of the inverse of that. Are there shots in here? Is it more difficult to go back and look at your earlier work because you have advanced now in your career as a photographer?
No, I still think they're powerful pictures, and a lot of people never expected this work for me to, or to see this work, and I kind of like that. You know, I want the next book to be, you know, the celebrity portrait work, or maybe the celebrity portrait. You know, I understand how to do a book out of your archive. It really takes a deep dive to look for new material and things that people might not have thought of, and things like that. But um um I I the shame of it is I really never used this work to promote the celebrity work. This work is literally sat in my file cabinet, and I look at it now. I was very close with a photographer named Jim Marshall. He called me his brother, and another photographer his brother. He was a famous rock photographer, and I wish Jimmy saw this work, and I could share it. I wish this was in my portfolio and could have inspired photo editors to give me more music work. And but I sort of had this thing of like leaving photojournalism and leaving it behind. And it was a it was potentially a mistake, because people who could see my photojournalist approach, I remember I'm shooting John Singleton for LA Style magazine, which was a very cool and hip style magazine at the time. And Beth Taubner, the director of photography at the time, saw how I had a journalistic approach to my portraits. And that inspired me to shoot Singleton with a Holga camera. And it became a classic portrait of John Singleton that started off my early magazine portrait work in Los Angeles. And but in a way, it's a shame. I sort of rejected photojournalism and wanted to make a point of who I newly wanted to be, and didn't monopolize this work, or use it, show it, have people enjoy it until now. And that's what makes the book even more special for me, because it's never been seen.
Yeah, that's really very unique to that, and it speaks to your work, that because you do hear some artists, some creatives that don't necessarily like going back and reviewing their own work or seeing the value in that, but it's neat to be able to look at it and see how it helped build a foundation, and how you wish you could have even used that foundation even more to further your career and all that. It's just a really unique look at things. And this is a nice longer span of time. It's over a decade that you cover in the book. And so it's really cool to see the progression, to see just the amount of, first of all, these shows that you went to, that it just looks incredible. I mean, these are legends that you are photographing throughout, and in that environment, in that space, to be able to see them just as normal people is something that is fairly incredible in and of itself.
I, you know, doing the press and doing the book, and it's like I have to have some perspective, retrospective of what an incredible life it was. It's like, the Clash is still one of my favorite bands in the world, and I was on stage with them twice. I was or at least on stage with them once, and backstage with them twice, um doing Blow with Topper, or I think it was Topper. It's like, I they were incredible life experiences, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to look at this work again, and see what's transpired, and talk about some of the stories that have happened, and really understand what that time period was like, because it was unique to music. I've talked about this, that that radio was so stifled and it was so hard to get on the air and it was so commercialized. But this happened in the rap scene too, right? Like rap music broke out at top 40 in Motown, and did the same thing. They had their same voice because the radio was locked up. It took college stations to break punk and post-punk and new wave.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You talk, it's mentioned in the book that in addition to the shots in the clubs and stuff, that you also did some album covers and other promotional materials for these bands. I'm just very interested in how like that happened. Did they just kind of like see you taking photos and ask you to do that? I mean, did you have to show the photos you were taking to them or something? How did that come about?
Yeah, musicians are an interesting bunch, because they really hire their friends and people they like hanging out with, and it wasn't hard. You were already taking pictures of them. They'd seen your images. They knew what you had done. They liked it. So it was just part of being part of the scene. I would have been part of the scene no matter what, because I really did like the freedom of expression and the music and all of that. But to be part of the scene and have a purpose was so much better.
Now Jeremy brings up a really interesting point. So you mentioned that these are the first time these pictures are seeing the light of day and coming out of your own archive. Have you gone back now and either sent these to some of the bands that are featured, had any contact with the bands that are featured to be able to kind of show them? I imagine it would be kind of a fun retrospective for all of you involved, and that's you and also these musicians that you've been photographing.
Well, I hope that happens naturally. I was close with a lot of bands were just coming through town, but I was close to a couple of people like Billy Idol, and as I talk about in the book, I met him at an event and I don't think he recognized me or put two and two together. I hope that happens naturally. I hope that people see the work, that they reach out. Any musician in the book can feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to make a print or do something, get them a book. When I moved, I went from working for the Associated Press to a staff position for almost 4 years at the Boston Herald. And then I had outshot two photographers People magazine had hired to cover the Maria Shriver and the Carolyn Kennedy weddings. And I was invited to become what was essentially staff for People magazine. It was a commitment of regular assignments. And when I moved here, I really didn't look back. I didn't do music anymore. I wanted to be a celebrity shooter. I got married and had my first child, who's 28 at this point. And I just sort of left any friendship or connection behind and left that world behind.
Yeah. Again, it's such a remarkable book. It's something where you can literally flip through for hours and hours and look at these, and it really puts you in the room where this is happening. It really puts you in those clubs, into this culture. As you mentioned, you do such a beautiful job of capturing that subculture, and if that's the goal that you were hoping for, you absolutely have achieved that, and the ability that you have is just absolutely remarkable. I will mention, when I went on today to verify release date and everything, it came out November 10th, and it is showing on Amazon. It says they have 10 more copies left, so you better order soon. So I know that you'll see them more over there, but certainly you better get on and order this soon so you can find that on Amazon or any other bookstore. But I also wanted to ask if there was anything about this story, this book, that we haven't asked you yet that you wanted to make sure you got out there.
No, I mean, I sincerely appreciate, the appreciation for the work. Um, it means a lot. And, like I was telling our wonderful audience listening today that, um, a book it's like 4 or 5 year project. It's like, it's putting it together. It's making a presentation. It's finding a publisher. It's entering it into contests. It's like, then once you're committed to it, it's like, you have to work on with a writer the text, and find a celebrity to do the forward. And it's a labor of love. We don't do books to make money. Books in this culture don't really, and this books, illustrated books, aren't like big money makers. This is all about like getting the work out there, having people appreciate it. And and you appreciating it means a lot. It very sincerely does. So, if the audience wants to see images, they can go to, since the title, which was created by my editor, Garrett, who I do love, but he's a writer, right? So writers come up with titles that are incredibly descriptive. He wanted it to be descriptive. So it's punk, post-punk, new wave, comma, on stage, backstage, in your face, comma, 1978 to 1991. So the website's actually called Days of Punk, because you couldn't have that as a website title. So
That would be kind of a long URL for sure.
Yeah.
And certainly we do recommend that people go out and purchase this book. But also, what my final wrap-up question has to be, and that is, you've just spent 5 years working on this book. What is next for you, right? We can't, no rest for the weary here. But I know you're also busy with your photography and everything else that keeps you busy. You sort of alluded to maybe the next book would be celebrity photographs, but do you have anything coming up on the horizon you'd like to mention?
I'm still doing some commercial shoots. I have 3 startups all related to the photography industry. I'm working on a documentary series. I'm got potentially a reality television show I might be involved in. But this book is like this book is like having a child, and you think they're moving out, but they're not really moving out, because they still have problems, and they still broke up with their boyfriend, and they have to go to college, and they need money, and this book, we're working on the gallery shows right now. And if anyone knows a good gallery in Chicago, we're looking for a good gallery in Chicago. But this book is like a baby, and it won't stop probably, for 3 to 4 months. And then I'm sure I'll still be doing press and stuff in the new year. And then we're still, then we're dealing with the shows and promoting the shows. And so this will keep me going for the next couple of years. Trust me.
I should mention, I think I'm going through a torrential downpour at the moment. So if you hear that on the mic at all, my apologies that happened. But yes, it is like a baby that has left your house, though, because it is in my house. And so I'm very excited for it. It's something that I'll treasure for years to come here. And it's so great to get to know you a bit more. And I really appreciate our opportunity to be able to interview you, not once, but twice now, and to talk to you about your career and where it's going. And we'd love for you to check in whenever you're able to. That'd be great.
I really appreciate it, Craig, and Jeremy, and our audience. It's greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. You have a great rest of your day. Just a fantastic interview again with Michael. I love getting to kind of hear his story in our first conversation about his origin story, about how he came to be the photographer he is today. And then also now to really dive deep into this particular subset, this subculture that means so much to him and to his upbringing as a photographer. We just thank Michael so much for the book, but also for the conversations that he's had with us. It's been wonderful to get to know him a bit, and I can't wait to see what he has coming in the future. He mentioned something maybe like a celebrity photography book in the future, and I can't wait to get my hands on that sometime down the road as well. Thank you for listening to the Front Row Network. You can find us on nprillinois.org under the Community Voices tab. You can also find us on all social media. Just search for the Front Row Network. And also you can, of course, find us on any podcast platform that you would like. I also host Beyond the Mouse for the network. So I'll tell you, if you're a Disney fan, to go check out those. We also have great other shows like Guilty Pleasures, Flashbacks, Full Disclosures, looking at new movies, and we have something for everyone, classics. So you can find something over on that Front Row Network feed. If you're a movie fan at all or like pop culture, there is a show for you over there. So again, thank you for joining us. And I apologize if you heard a Midwestern tsunami going through the microphone towards the end of the conversation with Michael. That's sort of why I am recording this outro by myself and without Jeremy. But we loved having you with us in this interview. And again, a special thank you to Michael. So for Beyond the Mouse, I am Craig, and I will see you in the front row.